So as you know, this particular session is going to be based on the basics of Python. We are going to see a small introduction of Python. So we'll start. I'm not sure how far you know about Python installation and all the basics of working with small variables. So it will be fine if you can just give me a small feedback on, are you conversant with the basics of Python? You can just say yes if you know Python, so that I can arrange my session like that. If you are not if you don't know about Python itself, then we can start with installation and see how variables are declared and small programs with that. If you know the basics of Python, how variables are allocated, what are all the data structures, maybe we can go for some higher level introduction to Python. So participants, if you can just give me a small feedback on that, you can just type yes if you know Python to some extent, and no if you don't know anything about Python. We can start from installation itself. Okay, so I got one response, no idea about Python, because basically many I see are from EEE background. Okay, okay, so I see a lot of no's only. Thank you participants. So I suppose so we can start with installation itself, because Python is completely different. It is an open source, and it is freeware. You can download and use. It's not like a MATLAB, which requires a proprietary software to be used. So Python is a completely freeware, and we recently we see a lot of researchers moving on to Python because of the ease of use, as well as there are multiple functions and already predefined packages in Python, which makes using it very easy for research applications, specifically for machine learning and data analytics type of projects. So I think because there are many no's, I'm going to start with the installation of Python. We'll see what is Python, how it is installed. Now I cannot obviously install and show you. So I have a file. I'll be projecting that. You can just go through the steps which is there for installing Python and how to start with that. I'll be sharing all the files that I'm going to show you today with you. Probably you can get them from your program coordinators. So we'll start with the installation of Python. We are just going to run through the document. We are not going to go through the entire process of installation. So we'll just go through the document which shows you step-by-step process of how to install Python and go about with that. So I hope my screen is visible for you. So these are the basic installation steps for Python. Python is a freeware. Anyone can download and install. It doesn't require a key as required for a proprietary software like MATLAB. So it's a complete freeware. There are different versions and different ways of actually using a Python. Now here, what we are going to see is the simplest and the easiest way, which involves an Anaconda installer. So we have an Anaconda installer. So this Anaconda is a navigator. It brings in the entire package of different versions of Python, different command prompt and different ways of writing a Python program and running it. So right from the basic, so if someone is very new to Python, you have a separate editor for us to start with Python installation. And if you are doing a research and you are well versed and conversant in Python, you can use a different editor so that you'll be able to manage multiple files. So I'll show you the basics of how to start with a simple program, how to start and write a simple program in a Python. So this is the website. I'll be sharing this file. You can make use of it. This is the website. You can download the Anaconda installer from this website. In that website, you'll be having 64-bit as well as for 32-bit for Windows as well as for Mac OS. So mostly we are all Windows users. If there are any Mac users, that is like Ubuntu or a Linux, you can use the other version. Otherwise, we are basically Windows users. Most of the Windows which is above 7 is 64-bit. Only that which is XP and below are 32. So we have a 64-bit version of Windows. There will be separate links for 32-bit and 64-bit. You can opt for the 64-bit Windows. It is very simple, just like installing an ordinary application like a WinRAR or whatever, a very basic installation. So once that is done, once it is downloaded, all you have to do is double click it and they'll ask for licensing. You have to give agree. So this we always do, even for mobile apps, we do that, give an agree. And then two important steps here. First one, do the installation just for you. Even if you have more than one login in the system, do it for you. Even if it is just one administrator alone is there in your computer, it is enough if you just give just me. So select this just me and then proceed with the installation. It will ask for the path. This is how the window will look like. This is the path for installation. Many softwares, where whatever you install, it will ask for the path of installation. As usual, it will be the C users. So you can give the C users path, and in any folder in that, it will automatically create the Anaconda 3 folder, and it will start installing all the data into that. So once it has started installation, it will ask for the path environment variable. Here you can see that it is given as not recommended, but still then you will have to select it. Only if you select this, your Python will be accessible from different directories. So this is a very important point. Usually we'll be focused on selecting only which is recommended, and we'll avoid the not recommended. But in case of this Anaconda installation, you can also have just this and go ahead with your installation. But the problem will lie in that you will not be able to view from other directories. So it is better to give this not recommended also. So don't forget, give this not recommended also. It is also highlighted in red, you can see. So you can just select this not recommended and give install. So the installation will progress maximum of 30 minutes, not more than that. 30 minutes for a very slow machine. So it will install it, and then there is no need of activation. There's no need of key or anything. Finally, it will ask for concluding finish, open directories, everything. If you just give next and then finish, the installation is done. That's all. So once it is done, you'll get this window, give a finish. So that is the final step for installing an Anaconda. Maximum a download as well as the installation will not take more than 30 to 45 minutes. Everything is completely freeware. You don't have to register in any site. You don't have to pay for any key. You don't have to link any activation file. Just plain installation is enough. So this installation is done. Now your system has Python in it. I'll just show you the Anaconda navigator also. So this is how the system will look like. I hope my Word file is visible to you now. So once your installation is done, as always, when you click start, you will get the installed programs. Even if you are going to install a WinZip file, or if you are going to install a VLC player, any media player, what we'll always do is we'll start from the start and see where that actual prompt is. So similarly, if you click the start, you'll be able to see the Anaconda in all programs. So after clicking start, go to all programs. You'll get the list of programs which are available in your computer. In that, search for Anaconda 3. It will be there, Anaconda 3. So you can just take that Anaconda 3, and inside that you can see the first thing is Anaconda Navigator. So this is the navigator which we are going to use for running our Anaconda programs. You can just click this Anaconda Navigator. You need not worry about all the remaining things. I'll tell you what are they. You can also directly access your notebooks. But first, we'll see what is Anaconda Navigator, and then we'll proceed with what is the interpreter we are going to use. So first, go for this Anaconda Navigator. To get a feel of actually what is Python, go for this Anaconda Navigator. This is how your navigator will look like. So we have multiple prompts in Anaconda. There are various prompts. All these are used for running Python programs only, but from different environments for different purposes and for different applications. So there are various prompts. We have a command prompt, just like how we have the DOS box, we have a command prompt. Then we have Jupyter Lab and Jupyter Notebook. These are the two important things we are going to use for the entire 2 sessions. And then we have a PowerShell, which is again the command prompt. There are various other things. Spider, which is used for many scientific applications. And these two are used for your display, like visualizations. We have more of visualizations. You can use this Orange 3 and the Bluebit. So these two can be used for visualizations. So because we are beginners, we are going to just use a basic interpreter. As we all know, Python is an interpreter. We don't have a compilation process. It is an interpreter. Each and every line, basically, because people are from mostly from EEE background, I'm giving this explanation. A compiler will take the entire program, convert it into an object file, and it will try to run it. Whereas an interpreter will take one line at a time. It will convert it into an object file, and it will execute the single line. So the Python is an interpreter, meaning that each and every line gets converted and gets executed. So if you have a problem at your fourth line, the previous lines will be executed. So it is very easy to actually debug in Python. You can actually see how far your program has run. Whenever if it is a compiler, it will not compile at all if there is an error in your program. Even if you have missed a semicolon or if you have missed a parenthesis, the program won't compile at all. But here in Python, being an interpreter, each and every line will get converted to object file, and it will also be executed. So you can see partial intermediate results as well. So this makes it very easy to spot where my error is. Say suppose line 10 has an error, line 5 will be executed. So you can see the results of line 5. So we know that up till line 9 has been executed and the problem is at line 10 only. So it is relatively very easy also. So that is why we go for the interpreter version for this Python. Here, what we are going to use today is the Jupyter Lab and the Jupyter Notebook. These two are actually interpreter prompts, whereas the Spider, which will actually do an entire process of compiling and running. So we'll be using the interpreter prompts. Interpreter prompts are available in both Jupyter Lab as well as Jupyter Notebook. Actually, I'll be showing you the Jupyter Lab prompt. It will be the same as your notebook, only few additional features for running and executing. So we can use this Jupyter Lab for our purpose for this entire session. So this is how your Anaconda prompt will look like. If you go to this Jupyter Lab and if you are going to click launch, and then the Jupyter Lab window will be opened. Now, when this Jupyter Lab window opens, it will open in your default browser. So a system might have multiple browsers. Generally, there will be an Internet Explorer. We'll have a Chrome. Some might have even Firefox. So there will be at least 2 browsers in a system. So whatever is your default browser, it will open in that. If Internet Explorer is your default browser, automatically the Jupyter Lab will open only in the Internet Explorer. So there is no worries. It works well in all the prompts, but preferably is Chrome. If you have Chrome, Google Chrome as your browser, like where you search for your Gmail or any Google, you'll be using a browser, right? So that place is where this Anaconda this Jupyter will actually open. So all these are separate standalone windows. This Anaconda Navigator is actually a separate standalone window. But once you launch Jupyter Lab or Jupyter Notebook, it will open in any of the browsers. So what are all the browsers? Internet Explorer is a browser. Mozilla Firefox is a browser. And then our famous Google Chrome. So mostly nowadays we are using only Google Chrome. So if you have set Google Chrome as your default browser, automatically the Jupyter Lab will open in the Google Chrome. Sometimes in some old machines, in some systems that we have in our college, we'll have only Internet Explorer as our basic browser. It will open in IE. No issues. There also it works fine. You can use IE itself if you have the updated version of IE. There also it works fine. But now I have set in this particular machine using which I'm going to show all the lab exercises. I've actually set Chrome for ease. So it will open in Chrome. Once I click launch, the Jupyter Lab or the Jupyter Notebook will open in my Chrome. The Chrome window will be where I'll write my code, I'll execute, everything will be done in the Chrome window itself. So it will be very, very easy. You don't have a separate prompt itself. Everything opens in Chrome and you can use the Chrome window. Chrome window, we'll get conversant with that. So you can use the Chrome window itself for running your Python programs. So once you click the notebook, we'll see this in live. This is just for pictorial representation. So once you click the notebook, this is how it will open. You can see it is actually the Chrome window. I have my Gmail here, and then I have my Jupyter Notebook also here. So this is an empty interpreter file. You can just type something and execute and see what is going to be the results. So this is what a full file looks like. You can have multiple lines, execute them together or execute them one by one. One command is executed. The output, you can see it immediately below itself. So wherever you find fault, you can segregate that line alone separately and try to rectify that line for errors. So debugging will be relatively very easy. And this is how your file view will look like, the various folders. So in any of these, you can just keep your files. I've kept everything in my desktop for ease of use. So you can have wherever you want. You can place your files in separate folders for organizing your files, and you can just run them. You can access them from this file view. You can take a file, you can create, save, delete, or create a new folder and put all your Python files inside that. You can do all these things. So these are the basics of the Anaconda Navigator. So so far we have seen about installing Anaconda, the various prompts in Anaconda. I have also told you that we'll be using this Jupyter notebook only. We need not worry about all the other things. So start with Jupyter is more than enough for executing even your ML type of applications, machine learning applications. So Jupyter notebook we are going to open, and it is going to be like this, and we are going to proceed with writing our sample programs. So this is the basics of installing a Python and how to start with that. I'll send you all these documents, and you can have a look at them. Now we'll go to the direct prompt itself. So this is the, I hope my screen is visible. Is my screen visible? Yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you. So this is the prompt window. So this is the actual Jupyter lab. I actually use the command prompt to trigger this instead of going through the navigator. I have something for people who are little more okay with using the command prompt. Command prompt is literally very errorsome. Even if you miss one space, you'll be actually missing the actual command. But still then, just in case you would like to know, this is how the command prompt looks like. You can just open the PowerShell. So you can see here, it is actually the PowerShell that I've opened, PowerShell prompt of Anaconda. In your Anaconda navigator, there was a prompt like PowerShell prompt. I've opened that. And in that also, you can open the Jupyter lab. All you have to do is click the PowerShell prompt and then go and type Jupyter space lab. Once you do that, maybe I'll just do that and show you also, so that you will get a feel of how it works. We'll close this window. So I've closed it. So this is my normal Chrome. You can see here I have my mail here, and this is my Google Meet. Probably you will be viewing my Google Meet now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the PowerShell. So this PowerShell I have pinned in my desktop just for ease of use, rather than taking from the Anaconda navigator. I've pinned it. So I'm opening from the pinned location. You can see it is showing me the path in which my Anaconda 3 is actually installed. I had installed in C users 3R, that is the folder where I've installed. So it will automatically, the PowerShell will automatically go into the prompt from where you have installed. All you have to do is just go and type Jupyter space lab. Once you click and enter, it will run through, and you can see immediately whatever is my default browser. Here, Chrome is my default browser, and my Jupyter lab has opened up in the default browser. In the left side, I can see all my files. I told you I have kept everything in my desktop for ease of access. So everything is here, all my files and everything, all my backend files, all the data files which I'll be using, everything is here in the prompt, and you can see the list of all the files here. And this is the view of the first file. So these are multiple windows. I've actually opened multiple windows. All the things that I'm going to show you today, I've kept it aligned here. So that's why you're seeing multiple windows. So if it is a blank one, you'll have just one coming up with just one line of empty line, where you'll actually have the interpreter prompt in which you'll be able to type the contents for running your program. So this is your basic Python. You can see it is very simple, just like it doesn't have any complex structure or a separate editor for running this, that, and then giving you all fear of programming. So it is relatively very simple. So this is the first line. You can see here, don't worry about the sequences. It will vary depending upon how I'm going to compile. Once I compile, these numbers might vary if I am going to run in different orders. So here you can see, this is the basic command prompt. you just type 1 plus 2, it will return you the results. So you can use your Python compiler even as a calculator. So you can just type two numbers, it will give you the result. So the first function for the day we are going to see in Python is the print function. So within this print function, it is a function. As said, it is a function. So functions automatically will have normal parentheses, normal brackets. So we have a normal parenthesis, and within double quotes, I've given a string. Whatever it is within the double quotes gets printed out. So this is the basic print command. You can also use without any commands, just type numbers and get them out, get a result. That is also possible. A basic calculator. This is what we call it as a Python calculator. So here we have a print prompt. You can also use single quotes. Python is very, very flexible. Flexibility in itself will give a fear of error also. So you have to be careful. Once you start using Python, you'll have to be very careful about few things. I'll narrate that at the end of this session. So you can also use double quotes or single quotes, both works fine. Now, how do you run this program? You have to enter. You are going to just type here. So we'll just type a calculator. So I'm writing 10 and I'm going to use the operator plus. I'm going to give another number 20. How do I execute this program? How do I compile and run? Obviously, you can go to this run form prompt and you can run the selected cell. This is also okay. But here you can see the shortcut for running is Shift Enter. If you just click Shift Enter, automatically this particular cell will get executed. So I'm just running a Shift Enter. Immediately below that particular cell itself, we will get the result. So this cell number is 1. And this result is for the cell 1. That is what is indicated here. So 10 plus 20, we are getting the output as 30. So whatever we are going to give here, you can just go click and then run cell. That is also possible. If you don't want to do that, you are okay with using your shortcut keys, then just press your shift and then press your enter, both together. Press your shift and then enter, automatically you will get the output for that particular cell. So whatever is there in this cell, you are going to get the output. Now this is your print cell. Yes, you can go here and you can run your shell. Otherwise, you can just keep inside that shell. You can, wherever you want, you can keep your cursor. It is not necessary you should keep at the end. Wherever you want, you can keep your cursor. All you have to do is shift and then enter. So when you do a shift and enter, it will execute, print out the results, and it will automatically go to the next shell. So whatever is the contents in the next cell, you can see here with this blue indicator. So this indicator shows that your prompt is currently here. So once you click here, you can see the prompt has come here. If you have here, then it is prompt is here. So when you are going to do shift enter, make sure where your blue line is. So that is where your actual cursor is. So if you are going to just give a shift enter, it will execute that particular cell. Because we have a lot of small windows here, it might not look too big for us. Only whatever the cell we want, we can just type content into that and enter and then click shift enter so that it runs. If you are not okay with using your keyboard or running it in the using the shortcut keys, it is always okay to go and click run and then select this run selected cell. So that is also absolutely okay to run. If you are okay with using only the GUI and not the shortcuts, just go to run, keep your cursor wherever you want within that cell. Which cell you want to execute, keep it wherever you want, and then go click run and execute that particular cell. Now, this is basically your Python, how to start with typing something and then executing it. If there is an error, automatically it will give the error below that line itself. We'll also see some errors because errors are the best ways to learn a programming language. We'll be seeing them. So basically, a Python has different data types, but as in C, I think many will be knowing C. So as in C, nothing is a hard and fast rule here. Everything is in a very easy way. If you want, you can store 10. If you want, you can store 10.5. It doesn't make any difference. It will not give you error. It will automatically do type conversions. There are additional benefits as far as a Python is concerned. Now the string, it has a special functions. You can manipulate, append, add, compare, anything with strings with just basic operators, plus, minus, divide. You can use all these operators in strings also. If it is C or Java or C++, all these things are not possible. C, Java are called as structured languages where you should follow some specific rules and restrictions. You cannot just like that handle strings. Data types are restricted actually. You have only very primitive data types like integer, float, and character. This character is organized to form strings, but that is not the case with Python. You have a different data type, a complete data type as strings itself. So you can do manipulations with string directly. There are additional data structures for your Python. That is why this Python language is widely used for data analytics. You have list, you have array, you have dictionaries, you have tuples. There are many different data structures in Python, which makes it very, very useful for data analytics purposes. So we'll gradually see one after the other. So here what we have is we have two variables. This length and breadth are two variables. We have assigned some values into that, and we are doing a mathematical operation. In the first cell, it was just numbers, and we had a mathematical operator. Now we have come on to the stage of using variables. So the variables are multiplied, length and breadth, and the result is stored in one more variable area. And I'm trying to print out the results for those variables. You can see here, I have initially the first string, it was actually within double quotes, we had the string. But now here, what I'm going to do is I have created a variable and I'm using that variable for printing it out. So print area, and then I'm given the print length also. So we'll first see the print area. So within parentheses, you're going to give the variable name for which you like to print. Now I'm going to just use my shift enter because I feel okay with that. So I'm giving shift enter itself. So here you can see it has calculated the area and given me out the results. So just a print command without much of a fuss. You have just given the name of the variable. If it is for C, you'll have to give the control string, double quotes, %D, what is the data type. People who have used C will find this very, very easy. But C obviously is a very versatile language. There, once you debug, your programs runs very efficiently. If it throws error, it means you have done something wrong. But for Python, we'll see at the end, even if you have done some errors, it will not report. So that is the problem with Python and languages like Python and MATLAB. You can do erroneous initializations because it will not give you any error. There, if you declare a variable in C, if you declare a variable as int A, you cannot pass a value of 10.5. It will automatically throw an error. So obviously, if you are going to, by mistake, if you are trying to assign a float real number for an integer variable, it will immediately give you an error. The program won't compile at all. But in Python, it will not give you error. If you have actually done it by mistake, it will proceed with the wrong value itself. So there are few advantages as well as disadvantages of using languages like Python. So here we'll see we have not declared anything like int or float. We have not even declared any variable. Directly we have got, we said length and then we gave equal to 10. The semicolon is not required. As we see in C, for each and every line, a semicolon is required. The semicolon gives the indication that that particular line has come to an end. Here it is not that. Your interpreter automatically assumes the end of that particular command. So you just go, you don't declare any variable. There is no data types here. Whatever value you are going to assign, that becomes the data type for that particular variable. So you can see here, I've taken length as 10 and breadth as 20, and I've given out the results. So it runs fine. I'm going to just print the area. It is going to give out the value of area. Whatever is there, it can also be printed out. So you can see here. So now how to identify a type of a variable. So you have assigned some value. You run a program. You are going to do it for your research or for your project. You are writing a big program. At some point of time, you are not sure what you declared. If you want to know the type of your variable, the function that you are going to use is type. If you say type, and then within that parenthesis, we are going to pass the variable name, it is going to give you the type of that particular variable. You can see I've assigned 10, so I'm getting the result as int. So we'll just run this. You can see it has given me the result as int. If suppose I'm going to keep here as 10.5, it will give me the result as float. So as simple as that, you don't have to worry much about your data types. We can just assign values and you can proceed the way you want. Make sure you don't do any wrong assignments. That's all. So here I've given 10.0, it becomes 10.5, so it becomes a floating point number. So the data type of a variable can be viewed with the function type. So first function we saw was print, which is used for printing out data onto the prompt. And the next function we are seeing for the day is type, which gives out the data type of a particular variable. So this is an example for float, which is given below. Now here I'm going to use some string manipulations. I have two strings. One is basics of Python. Another one is a string of numbers 1, 2, 3. It is not the number 1, 2, 3. It is a string of numbers because I've given it in double quotes. I said you can also obviously use single quotes and double quotes. No issues. If you want to declare your string in single quotes, declare. If you want to declare in double quotes, then that is also fine. No problem in using a single or a double quote. So here I've used a single quote for this and a double quote for here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this code. I'm going to try to append both the strings with just a plus sign. People who used to see will know, like you cannot add two strings. You'll have to write a for loop for adding two strings. If you have two strings, go to the end of the first string, and then from the second string you start adding. You have to use a loop for doing that in your C, but in Python it is just a plus operator. You can just use this str1 plus str2. It will automatically give you the output. You can see basics of Python. At the end of that, this 1, 2, 3 has been inserted. Now, if suppose I want to add a blank space between that, then I'll have to use this blank space. You can just here give any blank space and we can just type basics of Python 1, 2, 3. Or if you want to have any number to be added here, that is also fine. You can do whatever you want. So you have two strings. In between, you have another string which is directly given. So this is raw data. This is raw data, whereas this is string 1 and string 2 are variables. So you are combining variables with raw data. Everything is possible. Unless and until it doesn't produce, you don't give any wrong syntaxes, everything is possible here. So that is the power of using Python. Obviously, the power comes with few issues. Make sure you follow the proper syntaxes and proper indentation. So this is basically a Python command in which we are trying to concatenate two strings. Now, what are all these lines with hash? So these are all the comment lines, comment, C-O-M-M-E-N-T, comment lines. If you want to stop any line from being executed, or if you want to give any additional information. So throughout this, I have actually given a lot of comments for easy understandability. So these comments will help in making the code more understandable for person. If I have coded, I'll know what I have done. If someone is viewing my code, then I'm going to use these comments for giving additional textual content for them to understand what is given here. So this comment lines actually start with hash. So if you are going to start any line with hash, that line will be a comment. Comment lines are not executed. So whatever is given after this comment, that will not be executed. Now what I can even suppress this one, I have given a hash here, which means that that particular line has been suppressed. It will not be executed. So you see, I don't get any output. The string 1 and string 2 are actually assigned. But still then, because I don't have any statement for printing it out, I'm not having a output at all for this particular cell. So anything that start with hash comments that particular line. This comment lines can be used for giving additional information or for suppressing a line. If you don't want to execute that line, if you don't want to print a statement, or if you have given a line for debugging and you want to hide it out, these lines are used for hiding. That's all. You just give a hash, the line gets hidden from execution. You can view it, but it will not be executed. So that is the use of these hash characters, which will be used for commenting any executable line or any textual line. So these are the basic types, the string type and the number type, which we saw for length and breadth. The next type we are going to see is a specific type for Python, which is called as the list. So from now on, we are going to see some specific features of Python, which is not available in other languages. So here you can see it is a list. The list is actually an equivalent of almost an equivalent of a structure for in a C. You can have multiple data types integrated into one. So you have this variable one, this value one, which is an integer. Then you have a value 3.5, which is a float. Then you have a string in itself, complete string, two strings, and then another floating point number. So you have actually combined three different data types into a single thing. Such a thing can be done only using a structure in C. Here we see we are just simply creating a variable and assigning everything together. Say suppose you are creating the set of details for your students. You have a name which is in string, you have a roll number. Probably you can give it a number or in a string itself. Then you are going to enter marks, you are going to have the address, you are going to have the phone number. Each and everything is going to be of different data types. One will be in string, another will be in marks, should be in integer. And then if you're calculating CGPA, it has to be in float. So you are going to have a combination of structures, combination of data types. In that case, either we'll be declaring separate variables. In C and Java, what we'll do is we'll have, say, int roll number. Then character array, we'll have to give a name. So we'll be having different variables for all of them. Here, we have just created one single variable list1 and we have entered all the details directly. So that is the use of this particular data type called as the list. It is a very powerful data structure. You can use it for storing information. So now what I'm going to do is, this is called as initialization. I've created this variable and I have initialized. If suppose you want to make any change in this list, then it is absolutely possible. First we'll run this. I've run it. You can see here now, if I'm going to give the variable name alone at the end, that variable name will get printed. This doesn't work in the middle of a code. If it is in the middle of the code, the output prompt will be cleared. If it is given at the end, then that display will happen. You need not give even print. If that is going to be the last line, you are going to print that variable. You can just give that variable name directly. But it works only at the end of the command, end of the entire interpreter cell. If it is given in between, it will be overridden. So don't try it in between. You can give it at the end, or a best practice is to use print. Print will be the best practice. You need not worry about anything. You can just give print, and then if you are going to execute, that particular line will be executed. So using print will be the best practice. People who get used to using this command prompt and cell, you can just directly type that variable and see the output. But some cases it will be overwritten. If there is a in between, you have given list1 and you have few more commands beneath, it will get overridden. So it is always a best practice to use print and then execute. Now I've created a list. I'm going to do some changes. Probably I'm going to do a change in the marks, or I'm going to do a change in the name or the address or the phone number, whatever. I'm going to do few changes. In that case, how I'm going to proceed? I'm just going to take the value, the location. All these things are same as what we do. So it is 0, 1, and 2. So the index for these particular set of numbers will be 0 for 1, 3.5 will be 1, and then basic Python will be in 2. It goes on like that. So the index starts from 0. So what I'm going to do is 0, 1, and 2. So this basic Python is to be replaced with the number 100. So I'm completely changing the data type itself. Here it is a string, but I'm trying to enter an integer. Is that possible? Yes, of course, that is possible. So it is obviously possible. If you want, you can add any number because already I had executed that. So you can see I have modified the changes. So this is how it works. So I'll show you one more trick here. I've executed. Now I have basic Python. I'm commenting this change. You can see I've commented this change, so that line of replacing the number, the index 2 with 700 is not happening. So now when I run list1, I get basic Python. Okay. So now I'm going to uncomment. So I'm uncommenting, meaning this line gets executed. So the value at index 2, which is basic Python, is getting replaced with a complete different data structure of 700. So I'm doing it. You can see basic Python is replaced with 700. So it is that simple. Obviously, simplicity means you should make sure that you don't do any unnecessary change. It will not give you error. We have actually changed the data type. It won't give you an error. It will automatically replace. So in this case, we'll have to be little careful in modifying the changes. And now here we have one more thing. We are actually going to remove. How do you delete a content from a particular list? You have created a list and you want to remove. You feel you don't want to add the phone number, or you feel you don't want to add the address. Address is too big. You want to just delete it. Of course, you can do that. The function that is used for removing from a list is remove. So if you just give the list from which you want to remove. So list 1 is the name of the list from in which I've entered the data. Dot, I'm calling the function. So we are actually using this as an object for calling this function. People who know Java and C++ will know what is an object and a function. So using this, I'm calling this function and I'm passing the value which has to be removed also. Once I do this, automatically the list will get removed. So I'll just comment few lines and run and show you. So I've removed 12b. So now this is the input list 1. We have actually changed the basic Python into 700, but I still have 12b. I'm removing that from my list. You can see I've removed 12b. This was the input. I've removed the 12b. Now this is the output. So it is that simple. You just give remove within parentheses the value that has to be removed. It will automatically be removed. So that is the ease of adding and removing data. There are few more functions because of want of time. It is actually a very vast thing. We cannot cover it in 1.5 hours. So I'll give you examples for each and every basic operations, and it is up to you to explore all the different operations. We have one more function called as pop. This pop will remove the last element. 0.9 alone will be removed. You can get the index. If you say list1 dot index 700, it will give you the index within that 0, 1, and 2. So 2 will be the index for 700. What will be the index for 1? 0. So you can view the index in which location that particular value is stored. Then we have one more function called as length. This length will give you the length of the list. So it is going to give you 4 for this particular list. 1, 3.5, 700, and 0.9. The length will be 4. You can easily sort and reverse. So if you give sort, it will be 1, 3.5, sorry, 0.9, 1, 3.5, and then 700. It will get sorted. Reverse will do in the reverse order. It will start from 700. What is the difference between sort and sorted? Sort will actually do the change in itself. Complete array itself, complete list itself will be modified. Whereas in sorted, the list will not be modified. You will get only the output. You'll be able to view the sorted output, but the list inherently will not be modified. So I leave all these small functions for your own curiosity. There are other functions also. The basic notation will be list1 dot put that function, pop or index, or list1 dot index, list1 dot sort, list1 dot pop. So whatever you are going to give, you can use that function and see the output of those results. I have all these functions in files also. I'll share those files. Probably you can just run and see those files and get to view all these functions, how they work. So that is all about your list data type. So list is a very flexible data type. You are going to have multiple data types inside. You can add, remove, sort the elements, whatever you want you can do. You can even modify the data type. Now we are going to see another data type called as the tuple. Now this tuple is a little restrictive data type. Suppose you are creating a tuple and you don't want anyone to modify. Earlier it was highly modifiable. You create a list, you give the list to someone, the other person can do whatever they want. Now you are going to create a tuple data type, which is little restrictive. It doesn't allow any changes. So you can see here, I've created a tuple, but the tuple also has an advantage of creating multiple data types. So you have a integer, you have a string, you have a floating point, you have a single character also. So you have a different data types inside this tuple. Now I'm going to execute and see what will be the output. Yes, I get the output. In 20 basic Python, all the contents is viewed here. As in case of a list, here also it starts with 0. So I'm giving all the content 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we have 5 elements starting from 0 to n minus 1. If n is the size of that particular list or a tuple, if n is equal to 5, the indexes will be from 0 to n minus 1, which is 0 to 4. So that is how it will look. So here you can see we have actually printed the tuple. Now I'm going to try modify the contents of the tuple. So I have a tuple here. I've entered the value. I'm trying to change the content of 20, that is 1. So 0 and 1 to 100. Now let me see what it is going to tell me. So it is throwing an error. So what is the error? Tuple object does not support item assignment. So once we have a tuple that is created, it is practically not possible to modify a tuple. So that is the restriction that we have for a tuple. Once you have created, it is not possible. Whereas for a list, you can do as many changes as you want. You can modify the data type itself, you can change, you can pop, you can insert. Of course, in your list, you can actually insert also as we remove. So wherever you want, you can do any number of changes. It is a very, very flexible structure. Whereas this particular tuple is actually little restrictive. It won't allow you to modify once you have declared. So that is the restriction of this particular tuple structure. So we have seen that it is giving us some error there, asking us not to change the contents of the tuple. So now we'll see some important functions which can be used in both tuples and lists. So as you can see here, I have a tuple. I have printed it also. Now I'm going to verify whether a particular value or a particular element is present inside a tuple. Now for all these things, people who have used to see, whatever we have seen now, will be actually using for loops, while loops, if conditions. We will be comparing and doing all necessary things. But here we can see we are just using certain inbuilt things like not in and in. These are two operators which can be directly used to create. I'll show you a file in which we'll see how it actually works. So I'll share this file also with you. So these are the keywords, the various keywords that is possible in Python. So these are the actual types, data types, which is currently available in Python. Numbers, strings. We have already seen list. Now we are actually seeing tuple. We'll see one more thing as dictionary. Set, I'll give you a brief introduction about set. We might not go deep into that. We'll see list, tuple, and dictionary. These three are the very important structures for working if you are going to use data in your program. So numbers, strings, and list we have already seen. Now we are seeing tuples. Next we'll see dictionaries also. So I've given few commands also which you can execute. I'll be sharing all these things in addition to the Python file that we have. So this is all about the tuples. So you have sets and then you have a dictionary also. I'll show you that not in and in. So those are all special operators. Yes. So these are the special operators that we have in a Python. One is not and not is and is not. This is one special type of operator. And one more is the in and not in. So these are special operators, very, very special and powerful operators. You can check whether your data is there in a list or not. If it is going to be any structured language, you'll have to use a for loop. So right from the beginning of you have to start from each and every element and compare with whether, say, suppose you're having a set of numbers from 10 to 20 or 10 to 50, you want to search whether 15 is there or not. So starting from each and every entry, you'll be verifying whether it is 15 or not. So that is what we'll do in a C language, but here it is just a simple command, whether it is available in or not with the help of in. And if it is not in also, you can search whether 15 is not there in that list. So that is also possible, just the reverse, in and not in. So not in will return true if it is not found. So that is the condition, true if the value is not found. Whereas this in will return true if it is found. So that is the difference between these two operators, in and not in. Similar to that in and not in is, we have this identity operator is and is not. So that also we'll see examples. So here you have this particular tuple printed. I've printed out the tuple and I'm checking whether B not in tuple. B is not there in tuple 1. Yes, it is true. B is not there. We have only a character A. So it is returning me true. It is not there. If suppose I'm going to give B in, then it will return false for me. B in tuple, B is not there. So it is going to return you false. So try to figure the difference between in and not in. So if B is in the tuple, it is saying B is there in the tuple, but we don't have B, we have an A. So which means that the statement is false. B in tuple 1 is not there. So it is going to return me false. If I'm going to give not in, then it means that it is not there. So obviously B is not there. It is going to return true. If I'm going to give here A is there actually in my tuple. So it is going to return a false. It is there. I'm saying not in. So it is returning a false for me. So this is a very, very powerful operator, not in and in, similar to is and is not. You can directly search whatever be the size of the tuple. If you want to see whether this particular roll number is there in that list, directly give that roll number, search whether he is there in that list or not. Very, very powerful. You can directly access, and using that result is going to return a Boolean value, true or false. That result can also be used. If it is just for any application, you can get to know whether he is there or not. If it is a data analytics application, then that becomes very easy. You just search. If it is there, it is going to return true. If true is the condition, you are going to do some execution. Otherwise, if it is false, you can do another set of operations. So in that way, this particular in and not in becomes very, very handy for us. So the next type of data type we are going to see is the dictionary. Now this dictionary, as you can see, it has a different notation. We are going to use the curly brackets. We call them as the curly brackets. Anything that is declared with the curly brackets, we call it as a dictionary. This dictionary is actually defined with key and value pairs. You give a key and then you give a value for that key. Now I'm giving the key. Fruit is the key. This key should be followed by a colon operator, which is then followed by the value. Fruit, colon, apple. This is the first key value. Next key value. You can give n number of key value pairs in a dictionary. So next you are going to give a comma. You are going to say climate, colon, and then the value for that climate, which is hot. You can say cold, windy, rainy, whatever. So then I'm going to give price in cages. As why we have given a numerical value is, you can see that the key value pairs can also be in different combination, data type combinations. We are using strings as well as we are using numbers. So here we have a key which is a fruit, a key which is a climate, a key which is price, and then values. Apple is a value, cold is a value, 120 is a value for that particular keys. So when you give the output, it will represent them as key value pairs. The main notation for a dictionary is just the curly parenthesis. If you use curly parenthesis only, it will be taken as a dictionary. Otherwise, if you are going to use normal parenthesis or square brackets, it will be giving out error. So we'll just execute and see this. Obviously, we are getting the output properly. So it is a key value pair. You can specifically give a key and then get the value. You can just type the key. I've typed the key, price in pages. It is giving me out the results. If suppose I want to print the fruit name also. So it is going to give me the, sorry. It is going to give me the fruit name also. So I'm giving the price as well as the fruit. So if you want to display the value for a particular thing, you'll have to give the key. I've given only fruit. I've given the key. It has printed the value for the key. If you are going to have key value pairs, in some applications, this might be a little helpful. But in most of the applications, just tuple list and then we'll see array later. Those will be sufficient. So in certain cases, if you are specific about key value pairs, you can use this dictionary. If you are going to just give the key, it will print you the value for that. We have actually requested for the key only, but it will be printing the values. Whatever value this key represents, that will get printed. So this is the use of a dictionary. So we have seen almost all the data types except set. We have seen all the data types. So there are few advantages of one data type over the other. So depending upon the application that we have in hand, we can use any of these data types. Next, we see arithmetic operators. Obviously, I don't think this needs any explanation. This is same as what we see in other languages: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, modulo, floor division. So all these things are the same. Power is represented by double star here. So that represents a power. Then we have relational operators: equal to, not equal to. So all these things are almost similar to other languages that we already know. Equal to means we are checking for equality of the two variables. And then not equal to represented as exclamatory mark, and then equal to, greater than. So all these operators are relatively same. There isn't much of a difference. So all these relational operators will be returning either true or false as the value. It will return only Boolean. So that is also handy for us. You can use them. So in addition to these relational operators, we have the in and not in. So that can also be used. In, not in, is, and is not. So these four can also be used along with the different notations, different operators for doing any arithmetic calculations. Now we'll move on to the next structure, which is nothing but the constructs: if, else constructs, while constructs, and functions. So we have seen the basic data types now. So we'll move on to the next higher level of using if, else, else if, and then while, and we'll be seeing some few differences. So here you can see that we have we have a little different structure for if, else, else if, and while structures here. So there's one more thing to be noted here. So we saw how to print onto the prompt. How to get a value? You are going to use the function input. So input can be used to get data from the user. Print can be used to print the data onto the output prompt. Now here we have seen input. The problem with input is it will always return only a string. Even if you are going to enter the number 20, it will be taken only as a string. So how do we convert that to a number? You'll have to typecast. How to typecast? Just put the data type in front of it. If you want to get it converted to int, put it as int. If it is float, put it as float. If it is a string, automatically it is a string. So you need not do any conversion. Only for numbers like integers and float, you'll have to use the data type int and float. Easy conversion. Just put the type ahead of it. So I'm going to get two numbers from user using the function input. Now I'm storing that in n1 and n2. I'm checking if n1 is greater than n2. Now this is the syntax for if. If n1 is greater than n2, அதாவது if following to that you give the condition. There is no parenthesis. In C we'll have parenthesis for everything. So here we don't have parenthesis. If you give a space, then you give the condition. You say the condition has terminated by giving a colon. So this is the first time we are using an operator. If you give a condition and then you give a colon operator. The next line, this is the important part in if part. The next line should be intended. Only indentation determines a block of code. There in C or Java, what we'll use is, we'll use the parenthesis. We'll use the curly brackets. We'll open a curly bracket, we'll write the code, and then we'll close the curly bracket. Whatever be it, if it is if, we'll use the curly bracket, while curly bracket, for curly brackets. Even if it is a function, if you are going to define a function, you will use a open curly and a close curly for defining the if condition or the while condition or the function itself, everything uses curly brackets. Here we don't have curly brackets. The only thing we are going to use is spaces, 4 white spaces at the start of the line. If we don't do that, then the block of code will not be created. So that is the problem here. You should be very, very cautious in defining the block of codes using spaces. So if you are going to have even one more line here, that line also should be indented. Indentation is very, very important when you start using if, for, while, all the control structures. You are going to start using the control structures, beware of indentation. Otherwise, it will be giving out, it won't give you any errors, it will be executing in the wrong sequence. அந்த லூப்புக்குள்ள நம்ம அந்த லைனை வைக்கணும்னு நினைப்போம், ஆனா நம்ம இண்டென்டேஷன் கொடுக்காம விட்டுட்டோம்னா லூப்புக்கு வெளியில வந்துரும் அந்த லைன். சரிங்களா? சோ அதனால ரொம்ப கேர்ஃபுல்லா இருக்கணும் இண்டென்டேஷன்ல. சோ இப்போ இங்க இஃப்க்குள்ள I've given an indentation, I've defined this line. Differenceங்கிற ஒரு வேரியபிள் has been defined as n1 minus n2 if n1 is greater than. Otherwise, if it is else, I'm defining it as n2 minus n1. And then I'm going to print. Now see this example of a print statement. Now this print statement has a combination of string and variables to be displayed. So strings are given in double quotes and then the variable given without any quotes. வேரியபிளுக்கும் கோட் கொடுத்துட்டோம் அப்படின்னா அந்த வேரியபிள் அப்படியே பிரிண்ட் ஆகும், n1 அப்படின்னு பிரிண்ட் ஆகும். இது எல்லாமே சீல இருக்கிற மாதிரி தான். ஐ டோன்ட் திங்க் இட் நீட்ஸ் ஸ்பெஷல் எக்ஸ்பிளனேஷன். அண்ட் தென் n2 கொடுத்துட்டு டைரக்டா அதை வந்து பிரிண்ட் பண்ணிருக்கோம். சரிங்களா? So here we'll just run this code and we'll see. So it is asking for the first number, enter the first number. I'm going to give 20. Now it will ask for the second number. I've given 10 and then it is going to print the difference between 20 and 10 is 10. So this is how the code works. If you are not going to give a proper indentation, then it will not work. So let me show you that with an example. So here I've given the printf within the else part. Now this means the else part has 2 lines. First is the difference calculation and the second one is the print statement. Now if I am going to give a first number which is larger, then it will calculate the difference, but there won't be any print statement. You will see now. So I'm going to give a number, first number that is larger and the next number which is small. You can see I didn't get my print statement at all. Why? Because the print statement is now within the else block. Indentation கொடுத்துட்டேன் இல்லையா print statementல, அப்ப என்ன ஆயிருது, else blockக்கு உள்ள போயிருது அந்த print statement. Obviously எனக்கு கண்டிஷன் என்னது, n1 greater than n2, n1 35, n2 10. So n1 greater than n2ங்கறனால if பார்ட்டுக்குள்ள மட்டும் என் கோடிங் போகும், டிஃபரன்ஸை கால்குலேட் பண்ணும், ஆனா டிஃபரன்ஸை பிரிண்ட் பண்ணாது, ஏன்னா print statement elseக்குள்ள போயிருச்சு. So this is the problem with wrong indentation. இந்த ப்ரோக்ராம் நம்மளுக்கு எரர் சொல்லல, ஏன்னா syntactically it is correct, but semantically it is wrong. We wanted the print statement to be printed for every condition. Elseக்குள்ள போனாலும் print பண்ணணும், ifக்குள்ள போனாலும் print பண்ணணும். But இங்க நம்மளுக்கு என்ன ஆயிருச்சு, it is actually within the else part. So now if you are going to remove the indentation, you will execute again, you will see it will work fine for the same input. Here you see the difference. So that is how important is indentation when you go for if, while, for, whatever be the blocks of code. For everything, indentation is very, very important. We cannot use brackets. Brackets use panna error காட்டும். So brackets use பண்ண முடியாது. You have to specifically carefully use the indentation for putting a line, whether be it inside a block or outside a block. So this is an example of a if with else. So if condition, then colon, set of statements with indentation, else, colon, set of statements with indentation, and then without indentation, it will automatically become the main. It will get joined with the previous line of execution. Now we'll see else if. Elif, E-L-I-F. So that is the keyword for else if. If you are going to have more than one condition, how do I execute? So here is the condition. You are checking a number is greater than 0. Don't forget to give the colon. You have given a print statement. If it is less than 0, I've just given it as negative. If both the condition is not satisfied, and the last step will be to print the number is 0. So this is the if-else condition. I'm checking for positivity. Negativity, if it is not neither positive nor negative, it means that the number is 0. So the last default part is given in the else thing. So else, I'm going to print the last statement. So here only the additional syntax is elif, E-L-I-F, give the condition followed by a colon. else does not require a condition. Else will be the last part. If the previous condition is not satisfied, then we go for the else. Else doesn't require a condition. But if and elif requires a condition. It is actually else if, but it is written as ELIF. So if requires a condition, elif or else if also requires a condition followed by a colon, whereas else there's no need of a condition. If the previous condition fails, automatically it enters into the else part. That's it. So this is the execution here. So that's all about your if part. We have nested ifs. I have examples for nested ifs. So with this basic information, you can construct your own nested ifs. So now we'll see the for loop, because you cannot actually completely teach a language in 1.5 hours. So I'll just give you the brief introduction about what are all the features. Then we'll say it is up to you. I'll share my code. You can just use it for improving your interest in that. Next year, we are going to see the for loop. Now this for loop is also very interesting compared to others. So here you see I've created a list of numbers. Numbers in create panni 1 to 10 I've given the numbers. Now I'm going to create the for. So for the for, I'm using the in and not in. So that is a very easy way of declaring. You need not give the start, termination, increment. You can avoid all these. And what we are going to give is for num in numbers. So for each and every entry in numbers, this will get executed. That's all. For each and every entry in numbers, it is going to be executed. Percentage symbol is nothing but the modulo operator. Modulo operator is the reminder function. The reminder is 0. I'm dividing by 2, and if the reminder is 0, it means that the particular number is even. So that is the logic for this. I'm dividing by 0. I'm trying to find out whether it is an even or an odd number. If it is an even number, I'm printing it out. That's all. So here, this is the syntax for. You're going to give the for keyword, and then you're using a variable named num. This num should be part of numbers. That is what I'm trying to tell here. Num in numbers. So for every entry that is there in numbers, this particular if loop will be executed. See the indentation. So within this for, I'm having an if. Within this if, I'm having a print statement. So indentation is very important. So this is how it will work. So we'll try to execute this now. Yeah, we get the result perfectly. So you actually see the output because I've already tried executing it. Otherwise, you'll not be having the output. First time run pannamodu, you'll be getting the results afresh. So this is how it looks like. So another interesting function is the range function. See here, I've actually declared 1, 2, 3. I've written every number from 1 to 10. There is a function called as range. Now you can use this range just to say range of 10, but the range will start only from 0. It will start from 0 and it will declare till the n-1, something like your index. So if you want from 1 to 10, you'll have to leave the first and include the last number. You'll have to give range of 11. It will include 0 to 10. You'll have to ignore the first number. So that is how it works. If you want to create a you can say here 11. You can see 10 is also getting included. So it is 0 to 10. If you want from 1 to 10, you can leave the first index. So easily, instead of typing 1, 2, 3, etc., you can just give range of 1000, range of 100, whatever you want. You can just give and use those numbers for your for loop indexes. For loop la index use பண்றதுக்கு, instead of giving it directly, you can use the range function. So that also can be used directly. So in range, there are multiple variations. You can see the range doesn't include the last number. It starts from 0 with n-1. In the range itself, you can give increment. Say suppose for every even number you want to use, or every number in terms of 5, you can give the increment value 5. So it is 0, 5, 10, 15, 30, goes on like that. So you can obviously include that. You can also use negative increments, negative numbers. That is also possible. So these are all few examples with for loop using range. So this is how it will look like. There initially we had for num in numbers. Instead of numbers, I'm giving range. Number no variable declare panala. Direct on the function call pannidren. Absolutely possible. So num in numbers, I'm going to see if it is greater than 0, I'm going to multiply it with 10. So you will be getting the result. The last number will not be included. You should be aware of that. 5 will not be included. You don't see a 50 here. So that is the one trick you should keep in mind. It will be only from 0 to n minus 1. So the last number will not be included. Say suppose you want 5 also, you will have to give here 6. Then only you will be getting the 5, which will get multiplied with 10 and you are getting 50. So have this in mind. The last number will not be included. So this is for a nested for. We are having two for loops, an inner for loop and an outer for loop. If we are going to use nesting, whether if it is if nested ifs or nested or a for within a if or a if within a for, all these things you should be very, very careful with the indentation. Make sure you give the proper indentation. So here you can see I've given this in the outer loop. So everything has to be properly inputted. Now here you can see in the inner loop, but I have not given the proper indentation. Inner loop கொடுத்திருக்கேன், but actually நான் என்ன பண்ணிருக்கிறேன், outer loopல தான் இந்த for loop வச்சிருக்கிறேன். So அப்ப என்ன ஆகும் அப்படின்னா இந்த inner loop சொல்லிட்டு multiple times உங்களுக்கு காமிச்சிட்டே இருக்கும். சரிங்களா? You'll be able to see the difference. So இதை உள்ள தள்ளிட்டோம்னா இப்பதான் it has moved to the inner loop. You can see the difference. So that is how it is. So 1 input inner loop, 1 input inner loop, out of inner loop போடும்போது automatically it will come here. So இப்போ 1 2 போட்டு out of inner loop. So உள்ள கொடுக்கும்போது மாறி வரும், ஒவ்வொரு என்ட்ரிக்கும் வரும். I hope you get the difference. 1 2 க்கு அப்புறம் out of வருது. இதே இது நீங்க முன்னாடியே கொடுத்துட்டீங்க, உள்ளேயே கொடுத்துட்டீங்க அப்படின்னா ஒவ்வொரு என்ட்ரிக்கும் வரும். பாத்தீங்களா? 1 க்கு அப்புறமும் வருது, 2 க்கு அப்புறமும் வருது. It comes for each and everything. So that makes the difference of your indentation. The next one is your arrays. So now we are going to another advanced level. We are going to check for arrays. Now this arrays, as you can see, are similar to what we actually have in C or other languages. But of course, few advantages over arrays. So to use arrays, the first and foremost thing, you will have to import the package. So this is now we are going to actually start with real version of Python. We are entering into installing packages. Python has a wide range of packages. There are multiple packages which has a lot of powerful functions. We can just take and use them instead of writing a code for each and every piece of work that has to be done as in C or Java. Here we have this NumPy. It is actually NumPy, which is written as NUMPY, NumPy, but it is actually NumPy. Now we are going to import this NumPy as a variable. Instead of directly using it as NumPy, we are just saying NP. This NP can be anything. You can even give your short form. If you want to give JD, you can give JD. So whatever you want, you can give here. But for ease of understanding which variable goes for which package, we just generally give in a similar way, NumPy as NP. Now NP will be the object which will be used for calling all the functions which is within the NumPy package. Now this NumPy package has something called as the array. So we have to we cannot use it directly. We are going to use it based on this particular thing, np.array, and we are just giving the values which has to be entered, and then we are going to give the output. We can use different notations also. Here we have used the Unicode 32 notation. You can use obviously different notations for accessing. So as in other languages, arrays can be multi-dimensional also. You can declare multi-dimensional arrays. Here we have a multi-dimensional array. So two-dimensional, it becomes a matrix. Even in C, if you want to enter a matrix, we'll be using two for loops. One for the row index and the other for the column index. You'll have to use two for loops. So, but see here, it is such a very simple breeze. You have just taken and entered the numbers as such, that too in a combination. Floats and ints combined together, combining data types. There it is not at all possible. You cannot combine data types. Everything will return to float. Float is the higher level, so everything gets converted to float there. So here we are actually having different combinations. Obviously, it gets converted to a higher end of everything as floats, but you can actually give. There it will not even allow you to give, but here it receives and it gets modified to the float variables. Now we have actually entered a array, two-dimensional array with 3 rows and 2 columns. Now, how do I check the shape of an array? I've entered a matrix, I've entered multi-dimensional matrix. How do I check it? I'm going to use the function dot shape. If I'm going to use shape, now it is giving error. Why? Because I didn't create array itself. Why I didn't create array? I didn't run this file, this particular cell. Only if I run this cell, it will get created and then you'll be able to use. Again, I'm not able to use getting error because I didn't even run the cell which imported the NumPy package. So make sure if you are going to write one single code in different cells, ஒவ்வொரு செல்லையும் தனித்தனியா எக்ஸிக்யூட் பண்றதுக்கு பண்ணிக்கணும். பண்ணலன்னா அந்த செல்லை இம்போர்ட் பண்ணலன்னா கீழே உள்ள செல்ல எரர் காட்டும். இப்போ நான் இம்போர்ட் நம்பை as என்பிங்கிறதையே நான் எக்ஸிக்யூட் பண்ணல. ஸோ ஆட்டோமேட்டிக்லி கீழே இருக்கிற செல்லை எக்ஸிக்யூட் பண்ணும்போது எனக்கு எரர் காமிச்சிச்சு. ஸோ இப்போ நான் என்ன பண்றேன், இம்போர்ட் பண்ணிக்கிறேன். You get a star symbol, have a quick look, you get a star symbol, which means that that cell is getting executed. So once the star gets star disappears, it means that the cell has completed execution without errors if you get an output. சோஃபார் நம்ம பார்த்துருக்க மாட்டோம், ஏன்னா ரொம்ப குவிக்கா நடந்திருக்கும். இப்போ இது வந்து இம்போர்ட் பண்ணனால இட் டுக் சம் டைம். இப்போ பண்ணோம்னா ஃபாஸ்டா போயிடும், ஏன்னா ஏற்கனவே இம்போர்ட் ஆயிடுச்சு. ஸோ இம்போர்ட் அது எக்ஸிக்யூட் ஆகிக்கிட்டு இருக்கும் போது இந்த ஸ்கொயர் பிராக்கெட்ஸ்க்கு நல்ல ஒரு ஸ்டார் சிம்பிள் வரும். ஸ்டார் சிம்பிள் வருது அப்படின்னா தட் பர்டிகுலர் செல் இஸ் கெட்டிங் இன்டர்பிரட்டட். சம்டைம்ஸ் இட் வில் டேக் டைம். இம்போர்ட் பண்ற மாதிரி நிறைய இருந்துச்சுன்னா இட் வில் டேக் டைம். மெஷின் லேர்னிங் அடுத்த செஷன் பண்ணும்போது நம்ம பார்க்கலாம், இன்னும் பிரீஃபா பார்க்கலாம். இப்போ மிஸ் பண்ணிருந்தீங்கன்னா கூட அப்புறம் பார்க்கலாம். இப்போ நம்ம நம்பை இம்போர்ட் பண்ணிட்டோம். எனக்கு அரே 1 இருக்கு, அரே 2 எனக்கு வேண்டாம், அரே 3 மட்டும் எனக்கு வேணும். ஸோ நான் அந்த செல்லை எக்ஸிக்யூட் பண்ணல, இந்த செல்லை மட்டும் எக்ஸிக்யூட் பண்றேன். முதல்ல எரர் காமிச்சிச்சு, இப்போ எரர் காமிக்கல. இப்போ அதே மாதிரிதான் அரே 3யோட ஷேப், அதாவது காலம் அண்ட் ரோ சைஸ், ஐ ஜஸ்ட் வாண்ட் டு நோ வாட் இட் இஸ். ஸோ ஐம் யூசிங் த டாட் ஷேப். ஐ காட் த ரிசல்ட். ப்ரீவியஸ் என்ன வந்துச்சு, எரர் வந்தது இல்லையா, ஏன்னா நம்பையே நம்ம இம்போர்ட் பண்ணவே இல்லை, அதனால எரர் காமிச்சிச்சு. இப்ப நம்ம ப்ராப்பரா எக்ஸிக்யூட் பண்ணிட்டு வந்தோம்னா வந்துடும். இது வந்து இந்த ப்ராப்ளம் எப்ப வரும் அப்படின்னா, ஒரே ப்ரோக்ராம மல்டிபிள் செல்ஸ் நீங்க எழுதுறீங்க ஃபார் டீபக் பர்பஸ். டீபக் பண்றதுக்காக என்ன பண்ணுவோம், 2 லைன் எழுதி ஒர்க் ஆகுதான் ரன் பண்ணி பார்ப்போம். அப்புறம் மொத்தமா எழுதும் போது ப்ரீவியஸ் கோட நம்ம ரன் பண்ண விட்டுட்டோம் அப்படின்னா கீழே நம்மளுக்கு எரர் வரும். ஸோ ஒன்ஸ் டீபக் பண்ணிட்டீங்கன்னா யூ கேன் புட் எவ்ரி திங் இன்சைட் அ சிங்கிள் செல் ஆல்சோ. ஸோ தட் வில் பி ஈஸி ஃபார் எக்ஸிக்யூட்டிங் ஒன் ஆஃப்டர் தி அதர், இட் வில் கெட் எக்ஸிக்யூட்டட். So this is the value for your display. So 1ன்றது இப்போ array 2ங்கிறது பாத்தீங்க அப்படின்னா it will be a single row. array 2ங்கிறது is a single row. single rowல இருந்துச்சுன்னா 1 display பண்ணாது. So you can see here we have 4 entries. 1, that is 5 minus 7.4.
Madam, sorry to disturb.
Yes, ma'am.
Many participants are from North India, so they couldn't understand Tamil.
Okay. Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. I'll continue with English itself. Sorry, I couldn't see the chat window. That's why I didn't see that, because I was in that Jupyter prompt itself. I'm sorry, you have actually put everything in the chat window. I didn't get the prompt also. Jupyter was occupying the space. Sorry, I'll continue with the English itself. So you can see here, so few things that you might have missed it. Is like if you have a cell in the beginning, make sure that you run it. So this numpy, I said that was, I think that what I told in native language. So here, if you have to import, make sure that you execute this cell first and then continue with executing the other cells. When a cell is executed, you will get a star mark here. That is what I was trying to tell you. Instead of this 44, you'll be getting a star mark here. The star mark indicates that this particular cell is getting executed. So that is the way of telling the user that this particular cell is yet to be executed. Once it gets completely executed, you'll get the output, line by line output you'll be getting here, and then you can proceed to the next cell. Now in this array 2, we have individual entries, just 4 numbers as a single line. We don't have any multiple lines here. It is not a matrix, it's a single matrix. Now this array 2, you can see that it will give you 4 comma. 1 will be default, which will be left blank. Whereas this particular array 3 was a 3 into 2 matrix. So if you execute that, you can see that you are getting 3 rows and 2 column matrix. So that is how it is getting, it will represent the shape. Shape is used for retrieving the row and the column sizes, size of a array, whether it is a matrix, whether it is unidimensional or multi-dimensional. You can use the dot shape. The array name dot shape can be used to execute. Now we'll see a few more examples with arrays. Arrays can be directly manipulated as strings, like what we did for strings. You can do a concatenation by plus, you can multiply, you can compare, less than, even relational operators can be used with strings. Similarly, in array also, you can directly do all manipulations. Such a thing is not possible in C. You'll have to write multiple for loops for doing an array addition or array multiplication. Here, you can see you can use all arithmetic operators inside a array. You can even raise all the elements to the power 3. So exponential is given by double star, even that is possible. So all arithmetic operators, you can just like that write. So suppose you want to calculate the transpose of an array. All these things you'll be using when you are actually executing a data analytic program. If you want to calculate the transpose of a matrix, if you want to calculate the inverse transform, for all these things we have inbuilt functions. So that is the benefit of Python. Here now this transpose function is actually inside the NumPy package. That is what we loaded initially. So inside that NumPy package, we have this transpose function. The transpose can be used to transpose the entire matrix in just one command line. You need not write any form of big for loops for converting it. You can do sort also. Sort also gets sorted. Each and every row will get sorted in the specific sequence. This 3 dot means 3.0. Actually, it was an integer. It is getting converted to a float. That is why we are getting it as 3 dot. The 0 is getting left out. That's all. So you are getting the array row by row sorted in a specific fashion. So these are all the various operators for an array. Array can be handled directly by mathematical operators. So there are a few more examples with these are all few more examples with arrays. You can do accessing. So accessing will be little different compared to people who are known to MATLAB. And C, you cannot directly access, you are going to use a for loop. Whereas in MATLAB, we have a different notation. In Python, it is little different here. Here also, we use the colon operator only. But the colon operator behaves in a little different way. So we are asking it to display. So here C, I'm asking it to display the second element. Just print out the second element. So 0, 1, and 2. 15 is getting printed out. So here what I'm asking is, I'm asking it to print the numbers from 0 to 3. Obviously, what will happen is the last number will be suppressed. So 3 will not be displayed. You will be having 0, 1, and 2. The same thing we saw in the previous also. So the same thing holds here for array as well. The last number, even in range, we saw the same thing. If you want to include the last number, give a number ahead. If you want numbers till 30, give us 31, because it will show from 0 to 30. So if you are going to give 31, range of 31, it will give numbers from 0 to 31, 30. So here also, if you are going to give 0 to 3, it will give 0, 1, and 2. You can see here in the output, it is giving 0, 1, and 2. So that is for between the range. Between 0 and 3, 3 will be omitted. So it will not be included. So if you want to include 3, give +1. That way only you can accommodate. The next type of accessing an array is, you are going to give the number followed by a colon. So this indicates 5 till end. So starting from 5 till end. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 till end. Here 5 is included. So make a note of this. At the end, if you are going to give colon and then a number, that number will be suppressed. So colon 3 will display 0, 1, and 2. Whereas 5 colon will include 5, 5, 6, 7 until the end of this, because we have not given a number here. After the colon, I have not mentioned a number. If I don't mention a number, it will go till the end of the list. Okay, so that is the indication. So if I am not going to give 0 before the colon, it will start from the beginning of the list. So say suppose I'll just modify this. First we'll execute this and then we'll do few modifications and see here. Suppose I'm going to give a 1 here. I'm getting 0 is not there. I'm starting from 1, 2, 3 again will be suppressed. So 1 and 2 alone is printed here. So 1 and 2 alone is printed here. If I don't give this 1 there, if I don't give 1, I've not given 1 at all. I've just given colon and then the termination index. So just give colon, it will automatically start from 0. So 0, 1 and 2, 3 will be suppressed. Okay. So here we have 5 colon, which means start from 5 till the end. So it will start from 5 and go till the end. If I give just 6 here, so it will just print your fifth index. 6 will be suppressed. So that will be the way. After the colon, the index will be suppressed. Before the colon, it will be included. So just make a note of it. After the colon, 3 has been suppressed. We had only 0, 1 and 2. After the colon, 6 suppressed. We had only 5. So that is how it works. If you are not going to give a number at all, either before or after, if it is before, it will take from 0. If it is after, it will go till the end. So that is how array works. It is a little different. If you try a few examples, automatically you will get to know how to use this colon with numbers. Only thing you have to remember is after colon, the number gets suppressed because we'll go only up till n minus 1. But before, we'll start from that number. Just remember that. And specifying the end and the start is not mandatory. It is enough if you just give colon itself, it will start from the beginning or it will go till the end. So you can do multiple variations of this particular cell and try and see how the different, this is actually slicing your data. So that is where this is very important. That is why I'm spending so much time on this particular cell here. This is how you can actually slice your data. When you have a large data set and you're trying to do some manipulations, make sure that you know how to use this colon operator so that you can slice your data, take a part of a data and do some analytics, because the next part will be seeing ML. So that is where it will actually be very useful for you. So all the remaining things are which we had already seen. These are all additional examples only. You can just run and use these files. Everything is I think we didn't see the while part. While is the same as what we had, same as your for. You just give while and then you give a condition. If you have to create an infinite while loop, you are going to give true directly, followed by colon, and then with indentation, the set of statements. If you don't give indentation, automatically it will result in problems. You can see here while indented, if indented. Now this print will automatically come under the while. It is not part of the if. This print statement is under the while. You can see this is the while indented line. So this print is the last statement which gets printed when coming out of while. So you can just run and see this. It will ask for a vowel. So I'm going to give O, it will come out. So this last line, which is thank you, will get printed no matter what. So these are all few examples of how your for and while and if will work. All are executed files. You can just run and see them, how it works. We'll just take just 5 more minutes for seeing how functions work. With that, we'll get a feel of we have completed the basics of Python, so that it will be easy to go for the next part, which will be ML. Now here, how to define a function. So to define a function, ma'am, can I take 5 more minutes, ma'am?
No problem, ma'am. Continue.
Yeah, okay. We'll just see what is Python, what is functions, and then we can wind up this session. So function, defining a function. So we saw data types, we saw the various constructs, if, else, if, while, for, we saw everything. And then the last one is the functions. Now this function, how it is defined is, you are going to give the def keyword, you are defining, so that's why it is def, and then you are giving the name of the function, followed by parentheses. So this is the structure. Function means you should have an open and close parenthesis, inside which you can pass arguments. So you're giving parentheses, same as your while and if loop. After the condition, we had a colon. So here also, after the definition, we are going to give a colon. And then here also, we don't have any parentheses to delimit the function. It is only the indentation. So I've given the indentation. The first 3 lines are within the function. and the last line is actually the function call. We don't have a main file and then a sub function. Everything is written into a single cell. That is the power here. So we have defined a function. These three lines are given with indentation, and the last line here we have the actual function call. Now we'll see how it works. So you can see here, now people who had missed previously can see here, this file is being executed. It has not completed execution. You can see the star symbol here. So the star symbol indicates that this particular cell is under execution. It has not completed. If you get a number, it means that the particular cell has been finally completed execution. So it is asking for a number. So I'm going to enter a number. So it is just adding it out and giving me the return value. I've just printed. I've not returned anything back. I've just received one number, added to an existing number within the function, and I've printed it out. So that is the first function. Now the second example, we are going to return a value. When you are going to return a value, so these structures are almost similar. Only the def keyword should be used, function name, open close parenthesis, followed by a colon operator, and then with indentation, the set of lines. If you are going to return a value, the last line should be a return. Return can also be anywhere in the program. You can also have it as the last line, return, and then you are going to return a value for the calling function. So if you are returning something, the function call should be on the right hand side of the equal to operator. So these are all basics which we follow in every language. So if you have a return value, the function call should be on the right hand side of the equal to operator. So here again, I'm calling this function. There it was just directly given. See here, it is just directly given because I'm not receiving any value. Here, this function is actually returning a value and it has to be received. Where it is received in Y. So that is how it is done here. It is calling this and the return value will be stored in Y. Now I'm going to print Y here. So if we execute it, you will see the result. I am not getting anything from user. I've given both the values here itself. So it is returning the results. There's one more type, which is nothing but passing arguments. So without arguments, without return value was the first example. The second example was with return value. Now we have with return value as well as with arguments. So I'm passing two values to the function. If I want to pass not just numbers, you can pass variables, you can pass tuples, you can pass list, you can pass array, whatever you want you can pass, but this is the basic syntax. Separated by comma, you are passing the variables here, and then you are using those variables, whatever variable name you are given here, A and B, that has to be used within the function. You are writing the mathematics A plus B and you are returning that value. Because I have returned, I'm using a assignment statement Y equal to, and on the right hand side I'm giving the function call. The function call now should have two arguments. Because I'm having two arguments there, same number of arguments have to be used here. Here again, we don't check for any data type. If you pass 10.5 and 20.5, it will take as float and return a float. Whatever value you give, it will return. If you give one integer and one float, the integer will automatically be converted to 0.0 and that 0 will not be displayed also. So make a note of that. So if you run here, you get the result. So this is how you do return value as well as pass arguments for a function. So there are additional functions also. This is an erroneous condition. You can see I'm calling this same add numbers with just one argument. Obviously, it is going to throw me an error. So it will throw an error because the number of arguments does not match. Missing one required positional argument. The error also will be very, very clear. You can easily understand. Missing one required positional argument. It will even give the name variable B is missing. So it is very, very easy to debug. If you have additional parameter also, it will give you an error. Takes two positional arguments, but three were given. It will give you detailed errors. So you can easily identify where you went wrong and you can execute. So these are few examples with the same thing, same function, adding additional types and having more return statements or values. So you can obviously send any data type, as I said, you tuples, list, anything can be sent and anything can be received and returned as well. So that is the flexibility of having a Python function. So these are the overall basics of having the basics of Python. We saw the data types, we saw the control structures, and we have seen functions also. So with this, we can easily move on to higher level functions. We'll see about how to plot. Next will be the next session. We'll see how to plot, how to visualize your data, how to generate random numbers. We'll move towards machine learning. I hope it was helpful to start with for your Python. Basics, it's very basics, starting from installation to the different variables. Pythons have a different set of data types, so that's why we concentrated more on the data types like list, tuples. The brackets will determine everything. Parentheses, if you give parentheses, it will be a list. If you give square bracket, it will take as a tuple. If you give curly bracket, it will take as a dictionary. So these are all the few key points you should take back. And then the colon operator for slicing your array, how the colon operator works, and few functions like range, length, transpose, inverse. So all these in your NumPy package. We have just installed one package today, NumPy. NumPy deals with the array manipulations. In the next session, we'll be installing more packages. I hope it was helpful. Thank you, participants, and thank you, coordinators.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your wonderful session. Started from the difference between interpreter and compiler. You have elaborated a lot as a basics. Thank you so much. Participants, if you have any doubt, queries, you may contact madam through our WhatsApp group, or during the afternoon session also you can contact and ask questions. We will have hands-on session during the afternoon session. So I request madam, is there any requirement needed? Anything to the participants so that they'll be ready for that.
Ma'am, actually, I have doc for everything. Like if they have a Python install, the next session they can also parallelly execute with me, because many said like they are new to Python. Installing itself will take at least 30 to 45 minutes. That's why I didn't actually do a direct installation. I just showed them screenshots. If they have Python, they can work with me, or they can just see how I'm running it. I'll be sharing all the code files. Probably later also they can try and contact me if they find any error.
Okay, ma'am. Participants, if you are highly interested, you may install Python before, I think we may start the session at 2:40.
Okay, ma'am.
So that you can install Python, you can run parallelly.
Yes.
So that you can practice more on that. As electrical engineers, we should be familiar with these free softwares, so that we can apply these things to our grid, so that we can easily convert our electrical grid, existing grid, into smart grid, so we can contribute more in our research. Request all the participants, kindly install Python. If you have any doubt, then you can easily contact madam. And if you are not interested, then no problem, you may install it later. So we will have the session, afternoon session, at 2:40 p.m. Okay, thank you, participants. If you have any query, you may chat here, or you may give our suggestions and feedback and queries, doubts in our WhatsApp group also. Madam will be joining at 2:40 p.m. with us. Thank you, madam. Thank you so much for your excellent delivery. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.